大家都过了的水，古今啊，Wagi Shyac，欢迎收看《一打看世界》，一起看世界。我是 Wagi。Welcome to see 一打 See the World。I'm Wagi。一打不仅要带大家一起看世界，更要用我们的方式说世界的故事。我是 Lano，I'm Lano。Today's forum is special. We have invited 3 indigenous media leaders from Australia, New Zealand, and Canada to explore cultural preservation and the future of indigenous communities. The 2025 Reuters Digital News Report found that U.S. audiences now prefer getting their news from social media rather than television, reflecting a broader global decline in traditional TV news consumption. Meanwhile, Nielsen's June edition of The Gauge revealed that streaming viewership, which is about 45%, has surpassed the combined total of cable and broadcast TV. Dramatic shifts in media consumption habits are also driving indigenous channels to leverage digital platforms and telecontents to their communities.
And today we will examine the new landscape of indigenous media development, how indigenous language culture comes alive on screen, and how much AI can help, and how indigenous viewpoints can seize the initiative on global issues. Welcome to our guest. First is Tanya Denning-Orman, Director at First Nations of the Special Broadcasting Service from Australia.
Ura wamada nayukadil nayujunjun kukiyamajin berigava. So I am proudly a part of 300 different nations, First Nations in Australia, and my community are in the East Coast, north in Australia. And I'm proudly, as you mentioned, the Director of First Nations for SBS, which is home of the National Indigenous channel NITV. It's proudly been a part of SBS since 2012, but NITV first switched on back in 2007. So I've been a part of that network since it's first started. So I've worked my way through and I'm so excited to be here today.
Thank you and welcome, Tanya. And next is Shane Todima, Chief Executive at Whakata Māori from Aotearoa, New Zealand. Welcome.
Kia ora Ranau. Kia ora rā tātou katoa, kia ora Wagi. Tātou kua hui hui mai nei ki runga ki te whenua o Taiwana nei, e mihi atu nei ahau ki a koutou katoa. It's a great privilege to be here at TITV and being part of this program.
Yes.
I am the kaihautu, or the Chief Executive, as you mentioned, Ranau, of Whakata Māori, previously known as Māori Television, which is our national Indigenous broadcaster in Aotearoa, New Zealand. This year we celebrated 21 years, so we first were established in 2004. And I've had the honour of leading the network for the past 6.5 years.
Thank you.
It's great to be here.
Thank you, Shane, and welcome to Taiwan. And next is Monica Ely, Chief Executive at APTN from Canada.
Kwai, indeli wizi Monica Ely, al nombasquan neo zeodanak mahokamogan. So hello, my name is Monica Ely. I'm an Abenaki from the community of Odanak, that's in Quebec, located in Canada. I'm the CEO of APTN.
Yes.
APTN is the first national Indigenous broadcaster in the world. And we're just celebrating our 25th anniversary. Great accomplishment for Canada, and we broadcast in French, in English, and about every year about 15 different Indigenous languages. And in Canada there's more than 70 Indigenous languages, so just putting things into perspective here. And I've been the CEO for the past 6 years now, and thank you so much for having me here.
Yes. Yes.
Welcome again. At the beginning of the program we mentioned that the evolving media consumption habits. I'd like to pose the following question to our 3 honorable guests. Do you view the changing media consumption landscape as a new challenge or as a potential milestone? So let's begin by inviting Shane to share your thoughts, please.
Kia ora Wagi, and thank you for the question. It reminds me of the old adage that the customer is always right. And if you think about our customers, who are our audiences, are our viewers, those that consume the content that we share every day. Certainly with the evolution of technology, there is a lot more choice for customers, for viewers.
Yes.
And so what we've seen is quite a significant shift in the way in which we need to operate as media, as broadcaster networks. Once upon a time, it was that we would serve up when we thought was the best time and what the best type of content is, and audiences would come to you. It's completely the reverse now. We're having to go and find the audiences, making and taking content to where our audiences are and to the platforms in which they are using to consume content. So it's quite a significant shift and quite a significant change that has evolved over a number of years. But I think it's important that for us to remain relevant and be sustainable moving forward into the future, that we have to be proactive, not reactive in this space, and doing exactly what our audiences tell us that they want to see, but also how they want to receive that content and the types of content too. So yes, it's a challenge, but I think it's also a significant milestone as well that we're all having to contend with.
Okay, next for Monica. Has the viewership of APTN television channel been affected by the changes in television consumption habits, leading to a loss of part of your original audiences?
Yes. No, we feel the impact. We've noticed in the past 5 years about 3% loss in subscriber fees, which are actually audiences, right? Because in Canada, APTN is mandatory carriage. So as soon as you subscribe to cable, you have APTN, and we receive a fixed subscriber fee. So that's the vast majority of our revenue. So we've been seeing a decline. So viewership is migrating to online. So we've noticed that our linear, we are struggling. And actually a year ago, we had a broadcast model of 4 feeds, and we brought it down to 2 feeds, 1 French and English, and 1 only in Indigenous languages. And we've noticed that with that shift, we've lost some audiences because they have a hard time to find us now, because we've changed position on certain dials. So what we're trying to do to counter that is making sure that we're available on various platforms. And going back to what you were saying, meeting your audience, right? The audience will not come to you, you have to go to them. So making sure that you're on YouTube, you have your streaming platform. Yes, you're on linear, but more than that, you have podcasts. So you're on TikTok and whatnot. So really it's changing our way of broadcasting, but also the ways we're creating the content and how we're working with the independent producers, because we're asking them not to only think linear TV, but how can you take, let's say, a specific programming and cut it up into different clips so you could put it on various platforms. So it's a whole new way of thinking of your storyline and how you're going to present that story.
I think we are all facing the same challenges. And Tanya, as we know, in 2023 and 2024, NITV reached 3.3 million Australians on broadcast television each month, and defying industry trends to grow audiences. With TV audience reach and share achieving record highs, could you share the key factors that have contributed to NITV's remarkable achievements?
Thank you. It is remarkable. If I put it into more context as well, our population is not even 1 million in Australia. So our core audience, we don't say audience, we say community. And to go into what we've been just discussing, audience, our community, the relationship, and they are always right, but I think our communities and our mob have always made us, be listening to them and reactive. And as a community, we've always also had to be innovative the whole time to even exist as Indigenous media. So this disruption, we've actually capitalised off it in a way that, the consumption means we can commercialise in a way that we couldn't before, because we are telling the story that you're not just in the linear model, we're getting our stories out on all the different platforms. And the more that we've fed an audience, the more that we give them or train the audience to watch great Indigenous content, which we always had it, the more they're coming to it now. So before, the way the old television model of just the TV, we all sit down at once, that was actually even skewed to a mainstream audience. They didn't consider Indigenous value of content and the impact we'd have in audiences as well. So this disruption means that, yes, the linear and ITV is on the rise because we're capitalising off those audiences that are bored with the current old models. And in the same time, we're also taking our content on different platforms and different broadcasters. So we're going into their lounge rooms in different ways as well. So I'm really excited. There is a change with our teams behind. There is a lot of, transformation that we have to do as First Nations mob behind the camera as well. And like what Monica was saying though, there's lots of opportunities. So yes, you don't just go out on your shoot and do a show. You do a show, but you do all these other assets. So you're having a relationship we're storytellers, right? We're the oldest continuous storytellers in Australia, First Nations people. I could keep telling the story now. We're like having a good yarn, but we're storytellers, we're innovative, and we're making the most of this opportunity. It's really exciting.
And speaking of challenges, last year marked the Whakaata Māori's 20th anniversary, but in the second half of 2024, budget cuts set off a two-stage downsizing and content overhaul. According to briefings from the minister and the union, the Te Reo all-language channel ended its terrestrial and satellite broadcast in March 2025, shifting to an online-only platform and shedding more than 20 staff members. Shane, faced with budget cuts and platform shifts, what was the core program or service Whakaata Māori identify as essential to retain?
I think, first of all, it's good to provide context. So Monica earlier spoke about the funding model that APTN has, which is quite different to the model that we have at Whakaata Māori. So we're primarily Crown funded or funded by the state, by the government. So 97% of our funding, annual funding, is derived from the government. So of course we're always at the whim of what happens in politics and in the capital city in Wellington. So because we faced significant funding cuts, we had to make some pretty tough decisions. In saying that though, I just want to introduce you to a word in my language. The word is mokopuna.
Mokopuna.
Mokopuna is the term that we use for grandchildren or grandchild or great-great-grandchildren. It reflects or references future generations.
Yes.
And so the role that we have as custodians of Whakaata Māori today is to ensure that our stories are always told for our mokopuna. It's not for us today. Yes, we benefit from it, but it's actually about ensuring that our mokopuna, they inherit an environment but a world that also acknowledges who they are, values who they are, and acknowledges their identity and of course language and culture. And so the decisions that we made last year were about ensuring that Whakaata Māori, yes, as an organisation can continue, but actually our role as storytellers continues. And so we took the approach, coming to your question around the decisions that we made, not to focus on what we were going to cut, but actually to focus on what do we do really well? What do we do best? What do we do better than others? And it became quite clear that we do tell our stories the best. And so we focused, therefore, on high impact content is how I'll describe that. And that's not just content that brings in numbers or brings in audiences. It's actually content that talks to who we are as Indigenous peoples, as well as through our language and through our culture. And so that was a decision that we took. So it wasn't to focus on what can we cut, but actually what can we continue to hold on to and invest even more time and energy in. And that's the approach that we took. And right at the moment, we've set up a very good strategy and plan, which we'll see for the next 10 years. But we need to continue to plan beyond 10 years,
yes,
because it is about mokopuna. It's about making decisions today that will positively impact mokopuna and future generations. That's what our key focus is.
And what new non-advertising revenue stream are you most optimistic about for sustaining multi-language content over the next 2 years?
It's what I describe as a partnership or relationship economy that we're having to build. And that's also present right here. At a global level. So when you think about the significant value that WIBN offers us as a network, but I think collectively as well, in being able to share content, our content on other platforms and vice versa. But also we're doing that locally. So we're working very closely with local content producers, also with tribes, as well as with other organisations to co-invest, to co-produce and co-deliver content. We can, as we know, we're all faced with big challenges around advertising. So while advertising is one source of revenue, we need to think broader than that about how we can actually, continue to do what we do, which is to tell great stories. And we need to come up with, these types of innovative ways of doing that.
But I'd just like to go back to something he was saying about the children, the grandchildren, the mokofuka. Is that it?
Mokopuna.
Okay, that's okay. Mokopuna. And it's quite interesting that you're saying that decisions you make, you think about that future generation. And that's something we also do in Canada. There's this Iroquois philosophy, the 7th generation to come. And it makes you think that any decision you make, the impact is going to have on the 7th generation. So everything that we're doing today, everything that, because we need to make sure that our media, our voices are heard and are going to continue to be heard. I don't believe that it's a given that we're always going to exist forever. We have to work very strong to make sure that the 7th generation to come has that media.
Okay. So we are doing something to achieve, to make our audience, our generations, future generations, to keep watching our content.
Yes.
But we still have some old history achievement can be shared. And on September 1st, 1999, APTN became the first national indigenous broadcaster in the world, just as Monica in your self-introduction. And more than 2 decades ago, a small indigenous news team was created to produce national news program. Now with the larger team, how do you expand the content while keeping audience engaged, especially indigenous Canadians?
Exactly. No, it's a great question. And yes, APTN had the first indigenous news unit in Canada. Now there's about 70 people working on our news. And we have our weekly, daily news in English, 1 weekly news in French. We got our weekend special news. We got our current affairs. We got our investigative news show. There's so much happening, and there's an appetite. We've noticed there is an appetite for Indigenous-led news. Several years ago, with the recovery of the unmarked graves of the children that went to residential school, it really shook Canada. And a lot of Canadians realized that, oh, there is a traumatic history in Canada with Indigenous people. Don't ask me why they weren't aware, but it came to light. And so now they're coming to Indigenous media, they're coming to APTN to have the news. And the way we're reporting our news is different than other broadcasters.
Yes.
So let's say normally our news segment is about 2 minutes, 2 minutes and a half, which is way longer than mainstream. And we do it that way because we put things into context, so we want the non-Indigenous to have a better understanding.
Yes.
And what we do is also making sure that our people they have a voice, and what they say is important, and we give them that moment. So our news is out there, and we're doing actually really well on social media with our news. I mean, our news is on TikTok, so we do a really short version for the younger generation, and that's rising. The news we have on YouTube, we're getting an audience. Everything that's to do with Facebook and Instagram is not as strong because Meta blocked news in Canada. But on the other platforms, it's rising. So I think we're very conscious of that, and it's very important for us that our stories, like I said at the beginning, be on as many as platforms as possible.
I believe you have done a great job.
Thank you.
Speaking of non-Indigenous audience, Maori people account for roughly 17% of New Zealand's total population, and in the past, a large share of Whakaata Māori's audience was actually non-Maori, underscoring the network's broad demographic appeal. And Shane, how has your promotional strategy for Te Reo Māori changed as it has moved online?
So just to clarify, the channel Te Reo, it's no longer on linear, but it is available online. So it continues just in a different shape and form, or a different place.
Yes.
And if anything, I think with the evolution of technology and platforms and social media and digital, we've been able to, and I think we're all exploring and doing well in this space, different spaces in which the language is now being exposed. And I think that's a great thing. That's a great thing. And, you know, Monica has just spoken about being able to share stories in different ways depending on the platform in which you're sharing it on, which is exactly what we're doing. So when you think about exposure, when you think about visibility, when you think about reach, there's far greater opportunity today than there ever was to be able to share our language, to share our stories, to share our culture. And, you know, you make a good point in terms of our audience. While, you know, Māori communities are essentially why we were set up, to be able to share stories, their stories or our stories with our own communities. We also fulfill a very important role in building a nation, in building Aotearoa New Zealand. And that's a role that, you know, we've been very proud to support over the past 21 years. And that's not just with Māori stories, it's stories that belong to Aotearoa, that belong to the country. And these are stories that actually everyone should be aware of, and everyone should value, and everyone should appreciate. So yes, it is about sharing our own Māori stories, but it's also about sharing Aotearoa stories with Aotearoa and a greater audience as well.
And in your interview with Radio New Zealand last year, you mentioned that you were considering producing fewer but more impactful programs. What benchmarks are you now using to gauge a show's impact, and can you share any results with us so far?
In a nutshell, so we have our outcomes framework called Te Huapai, which is something that we've been developing since 2018. And it was basically acknowledging that Nielsen and other providers of data provide you with one perspective. There are other perspectives that you also need to consider in terms of the value that we give back to the public and back to the country, but also back to our communities. So it's over and above audience reach or audience engagement. It's also about, for example, how are we contributing to language revitalisation? How are we supporting greater language use within homes and within communities? How are we supporting greater understanding of non-Māori, of Māori issues, of Māori perspectives, of Māori ways of thinking and ways of working? And so those are just some of the measures that we also are tracking. And I have to say, I think we're doing a great job with that. Just recently, we released our social value report, which shows for every dollar that's been invested into Whakaata Māori, we're delivering a minimum of $2 plus. So that's double our annual budget that we receive every year. That is the value back that we're giving to the country, but also to our own communities.
Okay. we've seen indigenous language went beyond the classrooms and now broke into short video apps, reaching broader audiences. So we all know that many TV stations have their own social media accounts. So I'm directing my question to Tanya. Beyond the broadcaster, how does NITV use social media to amplify First Nations voices? And which audience have you successfully reached via TikTok, Instagram, or Facebook, or YouTube, especially those previously hard to engage? And which content format, as you noticed, drives the most engagement for language learning?
Yeah, there's a lot there.
A lot of questions.
There is. Look, yeah, we were, as I was saying before, we were innovative from the beginning because we had to really fight to survive as National Indigenous TV. So when I've been proudly leading the network since 2012 when we became a part of SBS, but before then we didn't have the platform. So negotiated a platform, a big multicultural broadcaster, and then we couldn't get into the other linear or the online site. So we were the first adapters when it came to social. People were saying, oh, you're cannibalizing your audience, but we were like, no, we want to go to the audience there, and the biggest uptake is our young audience. So when we're saying about finding the audience, that's where our younger audience and our future generations are, and the influencers are. And we've been dealing, we come off the back of a referendum in Australia. There's a lot of misinformation and disinformation going on. It was our younger audiences that took our content, our younger community members, and really were repositioning it. So that was even great, the fact that they were taking our content and using it on their platform. So the language goes well, it's an ecosystem. So we've been working with similar to how we've created content in the first place with our communities, it's authentic. So it's done with the community first. So we've got First Nation filmmakers and journalists. And what Monica was saying before, the trust and community are really finding and loving First Nations content. So number one, I always want to make sure our communities are happy, but the wider audience are coming because of that perspective that they're not getting elsewhere. When 5 years ago there was the terrible death of George Floyd in the US, and our media in Australia was saying, oh, look what's happening over there. We've got the worst incarceration rates of First Nations people in Australia, and Netflix actually told its viewers to switch over and watch NITV. So to have a competitive, well, I don't see them as I don't compete with them, because I like the fact that we're regulating the industry as well. We're making the industry more accountable when it comes to First Nations coverage. So what we say in Australia is also bad public perception leads to bad public policy, because we're such a small population. So we have a broad audience strategy. So part of my role at SBS is to find those audiences on those other platforms. But for NITV, its social is so loved and trusted, I think, because we're one of those first adapters. And when we have our young people comment on political affairs, or we show out politicians who are doing wrong, that really runs fast on social media when it's our mob, our perspective, and they call it out. The languages, we just did a beautiful series called True Colours, so it was drama, bilingual. I think when we were over in New Zealand last year, it was number one on Netflix there. So they bought our NITV original drama series, and we're a baby in the network between Canada and New Zealand here. And the fact that we're now creating bilingual content, and we've got 300 different dialects and languages, so it's hard as similar to what Monica was saying. So the fact the community are picking it, and we reversion their languages as well, but broad audiences, we were told people don't want Indigenous content in 2012. But they're loving it and they're wanting it, but also the way they're hearing and learning their language. We're a part of an ecosystem. Yes. So it's entertainment content, news and current affairs content, We're storytellers. Like, I know I've said that already, but it all depends. But the community own that content and they take it. So that's my tip, I guess.
Really nice to hear the development. And speaking of indigenous language issues, according to APTN's 2024 annual report, in 2023-2024, APTN backed 48 productions, totally nearly 390 hours of content, and 41% in English, 41% in indigenous languages, and 17% in French. It also broadcasted over 50 hours weekly in 16 indigenous languages. So how does APTN serve a small language community while still attracting mainstream viewers? Can you share?
It's a challenge, but it's a beautiful challenge, I'm going to say. Anyways, in Canada, I can't speak for the other countries, but I think it's quite similar. Our languages is our foundation, right? It's a big part of our identity. And when you lose your language, you lose that part of yourself. And it's really hard to regain that. So I had a dream when I became CEO. I really wanted to put indigenous languages at the forefront of APTN. That's why, being inspired by then Maori full Maori language programming channel, we launched APTN Languages. And even though there are some communities, only a handful of people will speak, we're still going to do a programming in that language because that has an impact. It makes a difference. You want the younger generation to hear the language. And I still believe that when you see something on TV, it shows how important it is. And I think people still believe that because it has such a wide reach. And what we try to do every year when we decide the different languages we're going to do, we work with our scheduling team and we try to create blocks of languages because there's so many of them. There's more than 70 different indigenous languages in Canada. We make these blocks so it's easier to promote and it's easier to market. And when people listen, they know they'll have a few shows in the same or similar languages that they could understand. So it's a beautiful challenge. I'm already feeling the impact because I know in the communities, a lot of people are learning their languages. And what great way to learn a language than by watching TV in that language.
So do you have any core KPI to measure the cross-community impact when planning program?
Well, we won't base it on audience success because that is not, you can't. If you have a community with 200 speakers, but it's the impact it's going to have. I'm going to say it's more that you have storytellers that want to do a show in that language. They're going to create positions. They're going to create jobs, translators, directors, actors, and whatnot that's going to speak. So you see that there's an ecosystem, a production community that's thriving and that's born out of that. So I think that's how we kind of see the success.
I think it's very instructive for TITV.
Okay, thank you for sharing. And let's take a short break. Please stay tuned. Welcome back to IDA See the World. With the growth of AI, it's getting harder and harder to ignore the power of this innovative technology and its impact on the ground. Generative AI has made editing, subtitling, and production more accessible. But we want to ask about your views on AI first.
So let's start with Tanya. If you had to choose one word to describe your attitude toward AI, what would it be and why?
I think I'll go to last year as well when I heard Aboriginal intelligence. So that's 2 words, but the attitude, Aboriginal intelligence. if I'm able to do the two. It's here, right? And it's a tool. And we've been the adapters, we can work with it, and we need to be included in it and not be left behind.
Okay, so Monica, do you have concerns about AI collaboration or creation? Will AI help preserve culture and language, and how do you prevent westernized or non-indigenous perspectives?
That's a good question. I think there's more research that needs to be done in AI when you talk about especially language. And that's a big concern I have. Indigenous languages are I can't speak for all Indigenous languages. I'm going to speak mostly about the languages in Canada and the First Nations because that's what I know most, especially Eastern Canada. They're more languages of concept. So it's not word for word. So when people talk about, oh, we could use AI and translate Indigenous languages, I go, well, I'm not too sure. First of all, there's, for many of them, few speakers. So there's not lots of data out there for AI to use. And not only that, it's for the comprehension. So just a small example. Auntie, right? In my language, the Abenaki language, when you speak about your auntie on your mom's side, it is not the same word than you speak from your auntie on your father's side. So how are they going to know the difference of which word to use? And it has an impact, and that's just a small example. But there are other examples where really it's more concept. So I'm very cautious with AI when I talk about Indigenous languages. And I think if there's something to be done, Indigenous people, we need to be part of that conversation. And actually, we should lead that. It's for us to do because our languages are sacred, and we are the ones who are in the better position to understand them and making sure that how it will be applied by AI as a tool would be in a way that is respectful towards the languages.
Yes, that's a very important principle to develop Indigenous language AI model, right? Okay, Shane, as far as we know, Maori language auto subtitle technology already exists. So has Vakata Maori integrated it into content production? So, and do you expect to expand your audience using this tool?
So the tool that you're talking about has actually been developed by a team of people led by one of my board members who actually presented at our conference last year about the work that they've been doing. And it's pretty amazing actually what they've been able to do. Because as Monica has just said, there's not a lot of corpus around for some languages, and that includes the Māori language. However, they've done a lot of work over a number of years to help build that corpus, because as we know, AI is all about data. And the more data that it has, the more intelligent it is, and the more that it can do. But to answer your question about whether we've integrated it, we haven't as yet because it's still work in progress. The tool is still being developed and tested. And we are also taking quite a cautious approach to it as well. We want to make sure that it's going to do what it needs to do. But I would probably just go one step further and say that the caution is just not around language. It's around culture, it's around perspective, it's around voice, it's around identity, everything to do with who we are as Indigenous and First Nations people. And so just picking up your earlier question about the word, and because I was also thinking about that question earlier, and I'd use another Māori term that we have, and it's kaitiakitanga, which translates as guardianship or stewardship. Because if you think about AI, it is very powerful, and it's growing stronger by the day. You only have to look at ChatGPT and how much that has grown over such a very, very short period of time, and what that's able to do right now for the average person in their homes, at work, in their communities. And so I say kaitiakitanga because while AI is so powerful and it also offers so much potential, it still needs to be properly, stewardship needs to be wrapped around it, especially when it comes to Indigenous matters, and Indigenous languages, and Indigenous voices. So we do need to, I think, absolutely embrace the power and the strength and the opportunity that AI presents and offers.
Yes.
But it needs to be done in a very considered way, especially when it comes to us as Indigenous peoples.
And by Indigenous people.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes. Because I think the other risk is too, is if we don't, we risk being left behind.
Yes.
Because AI is everywhere now. And I was saying earlier, we did a recent stock take about how much AI we're using. So we're not using it for subtitling at the moment, but we are using it in various other parts of operations. And I was surprised to discover that, just how much AI is being used currently by us.
Okay.
And I think the data sovereignty is very important. And as we know that NITV now has a new Indigenous advisory aims to ensure authentic Indigenous viewpoints. Could you briefly introduce it to our audience, Tanya?
Yeah, well, this stemmed out of our commercialisation of the channel. We haven't received, and to go with our funding model, we have a baseline from the federal government that comes through SVS, the bigger broadcaster. We have NITV keep its autonomy, but it's been a really basic baseline. So we had to commercialise the business, and so we take our content, broad audience, and that the more data or more audience that we're getting, the more revenue we're obtaining. But what we found is we're still a small niche network, but these brands loved being attached to the Indigenous channel. So what was once something that we're not mainstream, we're not broad, has become a unique selling point. So to go what we were talking about earlier on the impact of our content, it's more than just that passive relationship. So we offer a unique perspective because of who's making the content. And here's the content, but it's also how we're making it, and to go with the AI ethics and the data sovereignty, how we're entering it, but the ethics, and also treading carefully. We're considered, but AI is also lots of energy. And what's the biggest impact to energy in the globe? The first people that it impacts are Indigenous peoples. So the whole idea, yes, we need to be included, but we need to have ensuring that how we're going, what's the impact, what's the end game of AI. And so all the regulations, all the aspects. So this advisory, we don't just make your content, we don't just advertise your brand, we work with these brands on best ethics, and that Indigenous-led approach is being caught up. So, governments making their decisions, but corporate Australia is really seeing our unique position. So when we are looking at advice and how we can commercialise your product or work with our sector, we do it in a holistic way, and that's just us as as First Nations peoples anyway. So we're still treading carefully here in this space. Our core game is entertainment, news and current affairs, but we notice an opportunity, and we have to play differently than the other platforms, and we can offer something unique. So NITV's been around since 2007, but we've been many decades to get here as First Nations practitioners, filmmakers, journalists. So we have a lot to offer Australia. We want, culturally, if you're a part of that land, you've got to help look after it. So it's our interest to make sure more Australians understand. So that's what we do with our advisory, and we want to monetize it so we can get more money to make great content.
Yes.
And how about APT and Monica? Do you have any similar mechanism to prevent AI to kind of westernizing Indigenous stories or content?
Yeah, well, APGen has not tapped into AI. We're still looking into it, and we haven't applied it at the work. So, yeah. I know we're going to have to, though, but
in the future.
But we're not there just yet. I think we have to do our own research and exploration.
Okay. How about Shane?
Oh, I absolutely think that it is going to require really sound and robust ethics of how we use it. One area that we haven't explored is because AI, as we know, is currently creating content. AI is telling stories, and that's one area that we haven't explored in much detail as yet. Questions like, for example, would we share or publish content that's being made by AI? These are all really important questions that we need to be working through. We still need to do that work, but I think, for some of us, it's scary.
Yes.
Seeing that AI is creating now content that we've always loved doing ourselves, but then it's also accepting that things are changing and the world is changing, and as we have with many other forms of technology, we've had to adapt and embrace or learn how to control it or try to control it, and I think that's exactly what we're going to have to do with AI as well.
But like I said earlier, use it as a tool only.
Yeah.
See it as a tool.
Yeah.
Once you see it as a tool, that who's controlling it, we're controlling the tool.
That's right.
Yes.
Well, that's with all technology, right? You've got an issue when the technology is driving you rather than you driving the technology.
But the problem, the way AI is presenting itself, it's like it's giving it to you on a silver platter.
Exactly.
Right? But you always have to double check and triple and quadruple check everything.
Definitely.
That's right.
So you cannot take everything that it says for granted, because it gets the information on what's available out
That's
there.
right.
And there's a lot of misinformation out there.
Yeah, the
And-
ethics.
Yes. So AI is it's an opportunity, it's a tool, and we have to take care of using it.
Especially when it comes to Indigenous.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And despite various realities and challenges, UNESCO's 2025 study on Indigenous peoples and the media positions Indigenous media as a dual pillar of cultural heritage and public governance. How can we deepen our role within this framework? Specifically, how can we enhance our functions as a cultural language activator, a public governance gatekeeper, and a plural narrative bridge builder to align with these global trends?
And this question is for all three guests.
Yes.
And to respond to and share your perspectives, serving as the conclusion of the discussion today. So let's begin with Monica.
Well, those are big words that you use there. I do believe that, yes, Indigenous media is a pillar for preserving and promoting Indigenous languages, culture, knowledge, tradition, storytelling. I think it's a sacred role. There's still much to do, though. And the media landscape is highly competitive. There's an overabundance of content. I know we all do great and fantastic content. We just need to make sure that people understand that the content we do is for all to appreciate. Because I truly believe that as people get to listen to your stories, they get a better understanding of who you are and where you come from.
Yes.
And it's at that moment that they start to appreciate. And once appreciation is there, I believe that stereotypes and myths, they start to fall away. And I think Indigenous media, we are the pillar of that storytelling.
And Shane?
Well, first of all, just want to support everything that Monica's just said in terms of the important role that we play as Indigenous media and as Indigenous broadcasters. I want to take it back to the word that I shared earlier, mokopuna, grandchildren, future generations.
Yes.
Because as we know, the work that we do helps shape our mokopuna, our grandchildren, our future generations, in the way in which they see themselves as being Indigenous mokopuna, or as being Indigenous citizens of the world, their language, their culture, their identity. But the work that we do also shapes the way in which the world sees them. And that is so very important.
Yes.
And to me, that is our core role as Indigenous media, as Indigenous broadcasters.
Okay, Tanya?
What they said. Our role is beyond just entertaining, educating, and informing. It is a matter of life. Yes, the future generation, but the tipping point is today, is now. We are losing languages, we're losing people, so that action is so relevant today. And to sort of repeat what I had mentioned, that bad public perception leads to bad public policy. So the power of media to get into those broader Australian homes, because they're the ones voting on our future. So we need to be sharp and we need to get into those homes, but we need to be a trusted source of information for our communities and for our children to see themselves represented and see themselves represented positively, because in our Australian media, we barely existed in the Australian media landscape. And then what we've done with NITV, in a regulatory sense, we've actually shaped Australian media. So First Nations stories are growing more and more. So Netflix is doing, we're partnered with Netflix on a beautiful animation series. We partnered with the Channel 10 network, which is a very commercial network, on an innovation series. So it's not just about our young ones seeing themselves, it's other young ones seeing our young ones. And that's, you know, that's what's the power of it. And that's changing perception of how you feel about yourself and how you fit into the world. And, you know, as I mentioned, it's not for us as First Nations people, we need to make sure our humanity know how to survive and thrive on this planet. It is more than just about us. And that's the beauty of First Nations media.
Okay, thank you all for your wonderful insights.
Thank you so much. And let's wrap up today's Ita See the World. Thank you for watching. I'm Lana.
I'm Wagi. See you next time. Bye-bye.